Right, so
Episode 11 live now. Nets getting upset round two. Celtics done. The Suns pulling away from the Lakers. It looks like Blazers Nuggets coming down to the wire. Jazz up 3-1. So Celtics most recent fatality. You want to talk about it all, Iestyn?
I mean, I knew that when I signed up for a pod after Game Five, in which we were missing our best center, and Kemba Walker was out, not that he really provided much support in this series. Regardless, I had a feeling that this was not going to be a fun podcast for me. But I must admit, I'm kind of proud of my guys. I mean, Tatum played out of his mind the entire series. He was, he was boxed up the entire game, every game, and he came out and put on some of the most memorable playoff basketball of his career, which is really saying something because postseason Tatum has been incredible to watch the past 3 years. I'm kind of disappointed in the way things ended. Really, I mean, I always found that the Nets are probably the least entertaining super team I've ever seen. And you can count me being a little bit bitter for that. But no one wants to watch Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden shoot 50 free throws a game. It's not the best basketball I've ever seen. But hey, they win, and you can't count out the fact that these guys are all capable scorers, incredible athletes, and I mean, there's no one who quite does what they do better than them, and all three of them on the same lineup is just too much for most teams to handle. I feel like a different Celtics team would have caused them a little more trouble, but not this year. I will say, however, that I'm particularly proud of my guy Marcus Smart. He's my favorite, and he put through a hell of a series. Really stepped up to take on that number 2 role, which he should really never have had to be in the first place. So, yeah, you know what? I'm allowed to be a little bit bitter now that this is over, so go Bucks. Anyone who beats the Nets is good in my book, unless maybe not the 76ers, though. Maybe not them. It's okay. Well, we will watch this Wizards come back, and then maybe they can do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I keep seeing comments on the internet, and I think it's just people trolling, but they're like, Wizards in 7. It's like, no. One of the best players in the league didn't play for a majority of that game, and it was 7, but like I mentioned beforehand, it was a bunch of ticky-tack fouls at the end and free throws to extend it. So it was probably like 4 was when it was really out of the picture, and they're winning probably in 5.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like Washington even wanted to win. They just happened to just keep playing, and then the buzzer sounded, and they were like, "Oh, we got to do this again. We got to cancel our plans for the weekend because we still got to work." But circling back to the Nets real quick, the blueprint is 100% there. Any team that's at full strength can, I think, beat them. They are just a disaster waiting to happen, it seems. Once this team really gets into trouble, and give Boston a ton of credit. They gave them as much as they could handle with the depletion that they were dealing with. Milwaukee is as in sync as they've ever been and at full strength. So for them, I like them to come out around 2 over Brooklyn.
Yeah, the interior defense in Milwaukee is going to, if they can stay out of foul trouble, it's going to dominate the Nets. And the Nets have to rely more or less entirely on their 3-point shooting if they're going to take them down, which fortunately for them, the Bucks weren't phenomenal against throughout the course of the season. But if you live and die by the 3, occasionally you will die by the 3. If you allow yourself to get frustrated against a team with dominant interior defense the way the Bucks have, then you will cause yourself a lot of trouble early in games. And if a team like the Nets gets in foul trouble early, you can see them start to drop like flies because if one of their big 3 is out for any period of time, even if it is just he has to sit for a while so he doesn't foul out, that's an opportunity for Milwaukee. And Milwaukee has been known to capitalize on them in the past couple of years.
For me, I think Milwaukee does have a slight edge, especially when you put all your eggs in one basket in terms of, going full offense and no defense. Because, I mean, while there are very few guys in the league who can at least contain Giannis, Brooklyn is far from having at least one. I mean, Bruce Brown, like, what's that really going to do, if anything? So, and if you can't start with the best player, I don't think you can really start anywhere because, it'll just, you double team and someone's wide open, triple team, two people are wide open. And that might be what it takes if they want any sort of chance. But I do think it goes to 7 because, as mentioned beforehand, when you put all your eggs in one basket, you're going to dominate some games in terms of offense. So I think a couple of games they'll just simply outscore Milwaukee, but I have to go with Milwaukee in 7. And maybe that's just me kind of preferencing who I'd want to face in the conference finals, assuming we make it out the first round and be what will likely be the Hawks. So yeah, that's my prediction.
I think that we'll see a little more. Sorry.
No,
I just want to say, I think we'll see a little more of Claxton this series. Tangibly, he is easily the best player to go up against Giannis. But I think what will keep him out in crunch time specifically is his free throw shooting and also his rebounding numbers for his size and athleticism and his God-given gifts. They're kind of uninspiring. He's also still learning rim protection in the NBA. But, in the terms of just who they can put on Giannis, Claxton is easily the best player to do it. I think overall his youth is going to keep him back. I don't know how much we'll see of him, but we will certainly see him a little bit on Giannis this coming series.
Kind of to Ethan's point, what's so interesting for Milwaukee, Giannis is a better defender than KD. Drew Holiday is a better defender than Kyrie. And anybody on Milwaukee's bench is a better defender than James Harden. So yes, Brooklyn can beat them on the offensive end, but Brooklyn can't beat them on defense. So if 2 of the 3 can hit a shot, that's why I think Milwaukee should and does have the advantage, because for as talented as Brooklyn is on defense, like you guys said, they go all in for offense and hope that they 140 points is enough. And as long as they don't give up 141, they're fine with that. So for them, and Milwaukee, seems to me that they're one of those sneaky good defensive teams, because you never look at it, but then it's oh, we have Giannis who, 7 feet tall and can get anything, like a Rudy Gobert Jr. almost, if you want to put it like that, as weird enough as it is to say. So I think that Brooklyn really needs a better defensive game plan than they've had the entire season, because Milwaukee can really give them as good a fight as anybody in the league.
And if you guys all remember the playoffs last year, where Giannis was the reigning defensive player of the year, and it was he was massively criticized for not taking the heat down on the final shots of the game, where he was never anywhere near the ball on defense. He was consistently, guarding the off men, never right under the basket, never with whoever had the ball. And a reporter asked him after the game, hey, did you want to be guarding those guys in those late game situations when you lost that series? And he said, why would I? And he was crucified for that. He's the defensive player of the year. He should want the smoke. He should want these guys to come at him, because who better than the best defensive player in the NBA should be covering them in that scenario. I think he might have learned from that in this case, and we're going to see him. He'll probably get into foul trouble once or twice, especially considering the competition he's going up against. He's going up against 3 of the best guys in the league in drawing fouls. James Harden's led the league for the past 6 seasons straight in free throw attempts. Giannis is going to have learned from that series. He's been knocked out of the playoffs rather unceremoniously twice now when he was expected to win, and third time's the charm, frankly. He's going to have learned from his mistakes. He's going to be back to compete in this series.
Yeah, and I think Drew Holiday also really brings a huge presence. And while it's not really shown on paper as much, he might be a second team all defender, maybe first team, give or take. He deservingly so should be on one of those teams. And he'll have a huge task in guarding who will likely be Kyrie Irving and maybe a little bit of James Harden as well. But I think what he can produce defensively will be huge in this series, just as much as Giannis.
And kind of an unknown factor off the court, Milwaukee in the 5-7 form, they have an actual fan presence. Brooklyn, you're only getting tickets if like it's you have nothing else to do. You can watch a Nets game and not know that it's a home playoff game. Milwaukee, you'll know it'll be loud. It's three players that have made extensive playoff runs for the better part of a decade, so they'll be used to it. But I think for Milwaukee, defending home court especially is going to be a huge reason if they're able to beat Brooklyn, why they'll wind up beating them. And then in a series that nobody wants to defend home court, which I was talking to with Deontay the other day, the Mavs and the Clippers, Game 5 tomorrow night, back in Los Angeles. It's been a couple days since I talked about this series, and it's still so weird and so unpredictable. People seem to think now that the Clippers have the advantage again because they tied it up, but they also went down 2-0, and it's the Clippers and Paul George and Kawhi. And is there any advantage in this, or is this just going to be whoever wins?
Luka and Porzingis have been like Shaq and Kobe, but Luka's been Shaq and Kobe at the same time. I think he's really had a phenomenal playoffs given the fact that they have lots of people to throw at him. But this Clippers team just seems uninspiring. I feel like there's still a stigma of what happened last year in the bubble. It's giving me that team is kind of giving me 2020 Rockets vibes with Harden and Westbrook, where if I feel like they can win it all if they really wanted to, but I don't trust the team. The role players stepping up. Rondo's been a great addition. There's certain trades teams make for playoff time. Rondo was one of them. I think the Clippers certainly have a chance to beat the Jazz if that's how it plays out. The Jazz don't match up well against athletic forwards, and they have two of the better ones in the league. But yeah, I feel like Clippers should be a little more inspired because if things play out well, I think they'll have a very good matchup against the Jazz, have the chance to go to the finals, and especially the Western Conference Finals.
Well, I'll say the opposite, and I think that it really comes down to the best player on the court and how much that best player can produce, especially towards the end of the game, since these games will likely be close, and I think that's Luka Doncic, no matter how much he carries. And Clippers have practically thrown everything at him. They've thrown Rondo, they've even thrown Kawhi at him, and he still gets it done. And even with Porzingis becoming more and more passive, like by the second, I mean, the guy barely rebounds, and all he does is just quick trigger threes that, go in at a below average clip. But I'm taking the Mavericks on this one. Luka's just going to close it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say Mavs here. I mean, the Clippers are just missing that vital piece. And, it does seem like if they took this series home, the Clippers, then, the stars could align and they could just be more or less, they could waltz directly into the NBA Finals. But in order to do so, they've got to get past this hurdle. And if the Mavericks are that big of a hurdle for them, I don't think they deserve to be there.
Luka, when he wants to be, like Ethan said, is the best player on the floor. Mm-hmm. And as long as he stays in one piece, but his neck whatever injury, which is so weird because I feel like Luka gets the most weird injuries, and it always happens at the worst possible time for the Mavs, which can be said about any injury to any team. But with him especially, I don't think there's a team that is as reliant on a guy as the Mavericks. I guess you could obviously say, Durant, LeBron, but Luka really is the heart, the soul, the engine, the tires, the gas. He's everything to that team. And they really need the role players to play a bigger role. It's weird to consider Porzingis a role player, but that's what he's been doing. Tim Hardaway Jr. has to do what he can do. So if the Mavericks can just play the way that they've been playing and Luka do what he does best, I like them the rest of the series.
This is why I don't.
Though, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are seeing the series that are carrying on tonight right now, but this Blazers Nuggets game is down to the wire late. But Game 5, Suns Lakers, Suns are up 50-28 right now in the second quarter.
I'm glad you brought that up. The Suns went on a 24-1 run, and then LeBron got blocked by DeAndre Ayton twice and had to get helped up by two teammates. So it's just, quintessential LeBron James right there for you. And like we were saying on Sunday night, without Anthony Davis and this 75% LeBron James, it's just a never-ending uphill battle. And it's showing with 5 minutes left in the second quarter that it's very hard for a LeBron James that we've never seen before to be a very, very talented Phoenix Suns team.
Well, I'm loving this youth movement we're seeing right now, like across the whole NBA playoffs. I mean, so many of these good teams coming up right now are all led by these young, incredible, talented superstars. And I mean, the Suns, they've got, Booker and co, but admittedly, this, the Chris Paul effect is real in Phoenix. But looking at the rest of the NBA as we're seeing it right now, there's so much talent under 28 years old. It's just dominating in these playoffs. I mean, upsetting all these old heads that have been generally figured to be favorites. And, outside of, a couple series, in the Bucks series, Giannis and co dominated. But in that Celtics series, we got a couple good young guys coming up there. And they played incredibly well against that veteran Nets team. And honestly, if they didn't have all three of the stars that they have, it would have been a much different series. But there's so much good young talent coming up. I got to mention just how phenomenal this new wave of NBA players is going to be. The leagues are going to look completely different in 3 years' time.
Going back to the Mavericks Clippers series, I do understand that. I said it before, Steven. The NBA is like Mario Party. You need stars to win. I understand that Luka is the brightest young star the league has seen since Name the Player. But if you look at what Dallas is off the floor with him, they're not even a playoff team, really. I love Jalen Brunson. He's a very underrated player and one of my X factors in this playoffs. But I mean, without Luka, this team literally plummets 33 points in the offensive rating. He's played 80% of their minutes. And I know this is a small sample size, but if you look at Kawhi and Paul George, I mean, that impact isn't that large. This Mavericks team is centered around Luka. It has some really good pieces, but you still need more. If Porzingis is your second best player right now, I don't think you're going to make it out of the first round.
Well, you kind of answered your own question or your own point when you said he plays 80% of the minutes, and that's probably only going to go up once he's more healthy. So that's something I'm not really concerned about.
Yeah, he's great, and I'm sure he's been carrying them for 2 games. Yes, I just don't think that's like, what is he off the floor? What is it this Dallas team off the floor? I think the most telling part of a team is take the best player off the floor. That's why the Jazz are so good. If you take Donovan off the floor, take Rudy off the floor, this team is still really good. You take LeBron off the Lakers, and obviously they're struggling. You take Luka off the Mavericks, this team is not even a playoff team. He is great. And if he can carry this Mavericks team, I would be surprised. And I would love for him to prove me wrong. I would. But just as an overall team, I understand that Luka is the brightest young star since LeBron, MJ, name it. But this team isn't as talented or as good as the Clippers team, this overall supporting cast.
I do think the biggest thing with the Clippers, though, even though it's not a stat, if you will, they just don't know what to do, it seems, at times without more so Kawhi, because when Paul George is there, he kind of has a pretty concrete role. But without Kawhi, they just seem kind of stagnant on offense. It just kind of seems like they don't really know where to go with the ball a lot of the time. And then when he's there, he's obviously a pretty commanding presence on the floor for them. But without Kawhi, it just seems they're just kind of stuck in place. And then even sometimes with Paul George, you kind of feel like they force the ball to him just so he gets his shots and he gets happy. So with them, it's like, yeah, it's great that we have both of them out there, but is it kind of hurting us? You know what I mean? Like they have decent shooters on their team, and it just seems like sometimes the two of them feel like they need to shoulder the load when they don't really need to, when they need to share the ball a little more.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question for the Clippers, I talked with a good friend of mine about this after that playoff series, is that, you know, Kawhi and Paul George, they play like alphas, but you know, they're not a vocal leader, and you can see it in their game, but they'll never say anything to show their urgency. I think that's another big reason why they traded for Rondo, is because Rondo is vocal, he's been there. And you look back at that Raptors team with Kawhi, I mean, everyone on that team was just adamant in doing everything they can to win, like actions wise. Kawhi was almost shy to a fault in this Clippers team. I think that was a big reason. I think that's the biggest reason why this Clippers team really beat itself. I feel like the only people that can really beat this Clippers team is themselves.
Ethan can probably speak to it a little better, but look at what Philadelphia did. It took them a little while to realize it, but they knew Joel Embiid was their best player overall. They knew that Ben Simmons is one of the top 5 players on defense. They needed more shooters, and they needed guys that knew that once they get the ball, like, they have to score. Joel Embiid can do a lot, but he can't do everything just because that's how the NBA is played. Like your point to Luka Doncic, it's Philadelphia filled out their roster perfectly, like old LeBron teams, getting people that LeBron can enhance their talents and their skill sets. So for a team like Philadelphia, I think that's like a perfect example of what it seems like you want Dallas to become.
Yeah. And you can, I don't know if I'd make this argument, but you could make the argument that last year's team was better in terms of talent on paper. I mean, I'd say Al Horford's better than Danny Green, but that was something that simply never worked. I mean, he's a stretch 5, but they wanted him to play a stretch 4, and he's just not that. He's not a modern stretch 4, and it really clogged up the paint because he's kind of a high post guy, and that's really where Embiid also needs to operate in terms of the low post as well. So a lot of it comes down to, and this is why, you know, everyone is starting to say that systems are kind of disappearing, but that's a prime example where it simply just didn't work. I mean, I think Horford and Richardson combined for maybe 34% from 3, and Curry and Green are lighting it up. I don't know the exact number off my head. It's probably above 40%, maybe above 43%, but you know, that's a perfect example of how teams need to be built in terms of surrounding with your best players. And while I'd say the Clippers have done that, I think that more just comes down to just a culture issue, and you know, all this stuff with Doc Rivers in terms of prioritizing his stars and giving them games off, you know, really set the tone. Even, you know, when they try to trade guys like, you know, Lou Williams and Harrell left probably for that exact reason. It simply just didn't work. I really don't think Kawhi stays after this, and I've already mentioned it, but I don't think they win this series.
I think that's incredibly even-handed. Yeah, the fact is that this team's just not designed to win around the guys they have, at least not in the way that it was previously. And that's sort of how you need to run your team in the modern NBA in order to make it deep in the playoffs. And you need those guys to be healthy when they get there.
This is a totally random thought, but I just realized that the Warriors have a Curry and Green, and the 76ers. Like that never dawned on me. I thought you were talking about Steph and Draymond. I was like, oh, that's weird. Like Draymond's not that good a 3-point shooter. And then I was like, oh, Danny Green and like Seth Curry.
Yeah, the other Curry, you know.
But credit to him, like for a long, long time, Seth Curry was the higher rated prospect coming out of college. And then he never really filled out the way you wanted him to. But now, like, he's a real 3-point threat and a very respected shooter. So for him to have to just like go through that for his whole career, and then now it's just really clicked, and he plays in a very important role for where he is now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, you can't really spit on his career.
Seth Curry is one of those players that thinks he's a little better than he actually is, and it helps him. Kind of like Jordan Clarkson. Last year, I really think was his coming out party with the Mavericks. I think he really established himself as that fourth guy or third guy. I forget how Porzingis played that series, but when I saw that roster when I saw him go to Philly, I thought, okay, if they go to the playoff, this can be really good for Philly. And now with Embiid out, they're going to be asking for I don't know how long. They're going to be asking a little more of him. So it'll be interesting to see if he has any of that affected efficiency from the bubble.
And the bottom line is that he fits with the team. I mean, he fits it perfectly to what kind of JJ Redick was. A little more of a ball handler, which is nice. But I mean, bottom line, he's, a lot of times the Sixers would run like a dribble handoff, like into a screen with the 2 and the 5, and literally would just pull up. And that was often what JJ Redick done. It's not as common here, but you'd still see a lot of that connection between Embiid and Curry. And, like I said, the bottom line is just that it fits and it's working. And it really doesn't matter how talented the player is objectively, just based on paper, it has to fit. I mean, I think, it just has to fit.
I think in terms of a dribble handoff, in terms of Redick versus Seth Curry, I think it's a huge upgrade Seth Curry wise. Not only because I think he's in his prime right now, I would say, and Redick is, far from it, but he's also a much better ball handler, much better scorer. And you're right. I think as your fourth guy with a Simmons and an Embiid, you're going to need someone who's a great shooter statistically, and he is that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of great shooting, that's something the New York Knicks haven't done in what seems forever. Game 5 tomorrow, back at the Garden. Marv Albert in his final season, back at the Garden. I know what I think deep down in my heart, but does anybody else think that the Knicks have a chance to possibly come back?
I'd love to believe in them. I think that they've been one of the best stories in the league this season. I mean, watching their return to not quite greatness, but return to goodness has been unbelievably fun to watch. And it's like as much like the Miami Heat were last year, that it's fun team with a lot of heart who you're rooting for and you want them to win it all. But quite frankly, they hit the playoffs and they were just not ready yet. They got the boost they needed from Madison Square Garden. They got a little bit more heart and soul than most of the other teams in these playoffs, but they just don't have the skill to match up. I think maybe this time next year we could be seeing a deeper run from them, but they'll need to prove that they're a lot better than they are right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, go on.
Going into the season, the Knicks, you could questionably say that they had like one like really good player, and that was Julius Randle. But I mean, without his boom in production, there's really no Knicks team. But the one advantage that they do have, assuming they lose this series, I feel like every year there's always rumors surrounding certain players that they'll go to the Knicks just based on the market. But obviously you look at the roster and how this team is ran, and it's just terrible for the past couple of years. I feel like I'm confident that's going to change this season just simply based off of their success. And that's huge because you're going to see a lot of different players and a lot better players on this team. So next year will be extremely intriguing for the next team. But I mean, right now with guys like Reggie Bullock shooting like absolute garbage and no real playoff point guard, it's really hard to match up with this Hawks team. Yeah.
Before I go on my take, I have to say, hearing Madison Square Garden erupt like that is one of the most stimulating things I've felt or heard in a while. And I wish with all my heart that they would finish the series, but I don't think so. If you look at the talent difference just between the Knicks and the Hawks, I mean, it's a big difference. I can think of three 3 guys at most that are going to get minutes on that Hawks team if you put that Knicks team and that Hawks team together. I mean, I'm thinking Randall, I'm thinking Barrett, and maybe Rose. But there's a big gap of talent between the Knicks and the Hawks. And I hate to see Trae Young move on. I don't know. I'm just not a big Trae Young fan.
He makes a great villain, though, doesn't he?
No, he doesn't.
I like how
he looks like a 4-year-old who happens to shoot 40-footers. There's like nothing.
That's not true. He looks like a
villain.
See, it's
balding
working.
4-year-old.
It's working. Look how mad you're getting over.
No,
it.
but okay,
See,
it's
what
it's
all of
way
us
different
want.
though. I didn't like Trae Young for a long time. The way that he plays basketball is so bad. But just the fact that I have to like see him shoved down my throat for 5 games, and then like Mark Jones talking about how awesome he is in Atlanta, like pretty much writing a love letter to this guy while his fingers are covered in like lemon pepper remnants. Like, I get it, dude. Yeah, he can hit 40-footers. Ooh.
See, this is what I mean. He makes a great villain. Working. We love to hate this man.
It's literally working. Like, this is what
we went the whole time without saying, oh man, like I feel my heart beating faster.
See, he does that though. I mean, he's irritating. You don't like to watch him, and if your team's playing against him, you know that you're going to be frothing at the mouth by the time it's halftime because he irritates you. There's a few guys in the league who incense opposition like that, and Trae Young's one of them. I mean, he does it to the players, he does it to the fans, and it's another reason why everyone wants the Knicks to win so badly. I mean, they're a fun story. We've all enjoyed watching them, but you can't help but want to watch Trae Young lose because he
might cry.
Are you rooting for that? Would you like that?
I mean, it'd be pretty funny. Like,
just speaking of villains, he's a villain.
Speaking of villains, as a Jazz fan,
head rent free.
Speaking of villains, as a Jazz fan, Dylan Brooks is getting under my skin, but not too much because I'm a Duck. But
like it's different. The Jazz are like winning, and Dylan Brooks doesn't do that much. Like Trae, we just it's just like PTSD of Sunday.
Hey, all I'm saying is there's a lot of housewives in Utah right now that do not like Dylan Brooks.
But it's like different. It's been like 5 games of Trae Young, just like, another 3. Oh, look at this. Like, he just makes ordinary passes because he's like 6 feet tall. Everyone's like, wow, that's so incredible. How did he see over him?
I do this. Oh, sorry. I have to go. I'm sorry, but thank you for having me on. I'm sorry I have to cut this late. And hey, Trae Young sucks. He's balding at age 20. That says a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like an unfortunate thing for him. But yeah, Knicks in 7. The shooting's just been so abysmal. It's hard to think about, and I didn't like realize it until today. It's like the way that this roster was constructed is like shocking. They made the playoffs, let alone had home court advantage for, the first round. So it was, I don't know. Run's not over yet.
I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by them this season, and I think that they have what it takes to compete next year. I've enjoyed rooting for them, but they've got clear holes that need to be filled. But I mean, you're right; they're a big market, and now that they're not a garbage franchise that no one wants to play for, the big market might actually help. I mean, everyone might sign with the Knicks. I mean, they made Derrick Rose look like a hero again, and I think we'll all thank them for that.
Derrick Rose is going to get a max contract. I'm not even mad about it.
I would be furious.
He deserves every single penny of it. If he's not in a New York Knicks uniform next year, I don't know what I'll do.
He may have deserved it based on his career so far, but he's not going to deserve it over the next 4 years.
I don't know. He's telling everybody he's not the old Derrick Rose. He's the current Derrick Rose, and that deserves a max contract.
I think he would rather be the old Derrick Rose.
I guess it's just like him saying like, "Hey, stop comparing me to that guy. I'm not that guy anymore. I got this cool neck tattoo and like I can shoot threes now. I don't dunk, but I can do a lot of other things better."
Yeah, quite frankly, I feel like a 3 is I like the huge momentum shift that a dunk used to provide is what a deep 3 does now. Dunks are great, but unless it's a post-up, people don't care the same way. A deep 3 though, like you hit it from the logo, the whole stadium will be up.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Or, like a 40-footer constantly. So yeah, that's gonna wrap up our show today. Kind of a Jordan flu game for me. I've had a cramp in my left leg since like I finished introducing the podcast, so I've been dealing with that. And Trayon got under my skin, so like kind of my flu game over here.
Well, thank you for putting up 40 plus.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got to do it. So that is all for our show. Instagram handle is Wavelengths Pod at the Sportswave official Sportswave YouTube channel for full episodes. That's it. Anything else you guys wanted to add?
Next
Young
season's
lives
our
in your
season.
head, rent free.
Full episodes on
Cuddies.
Spotify, Apple, YouTube.